West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Now, even though the actual hearing today wasn't exactly cinematic, it was still fairly dramatic. This case, with 19 defendants all demanding different things, is sort of a logistical nightmare. And the logistics really matter here. The logistics are going to play a very meaningful role in determining how and when this case gets to trial, which in turn could be critical in terms of actual accountability. Today, lawyers for Ms. Powell and Mr. Chesbro tried to argue that to meet their defendants' rights to a speedy and fair trial, that they should both be tried next month individually. The judge here, Scott McAfee, did not go for that. So their trial is still set for next month, October 23rd, but Mr. Chesbro and Ms. Powell will be tried together. The judge essentially asserted that because Powell and Chesbro have never met, and because they will tell the jury that, the idea that they would have any guilt by association issues is null and void. And Judge McAfee isn't going to waste court resources trying them separately. So at the very least, Mr. Chesbro and Ms. Powell go to trial next month, which is a little over 6 weeks from now. But that brings us to the much bigger question posed today. Do the 17 other defendants, including a one Donald Trump, do they have to go to trial next month as well? Now, the prosecutors from the District Attorney Fani Willis's office, they think, yes, they should.
Judge, we contend that we must prove the entire conspiracy against each and every one charged. Each and every one charged. So the court, in the interest of judicial economy, would have to make the decision as to whether or not the court wants to try the same case 19 times or 2.
The state's position is that whether we have one trial or 19 trials, the evidence is exactly the same. The number of witnesses is the same. And so many of the arguments that are made on the other side evaporate.
Today, the prosecutors told the judge that because they believe they need to prove the entire conspiracy in each and every case, even if a trial is just for one or two defendants, each trial will take roughly the same amount of time. Prosecutors estimated that a case against all 19 co-defendants together would take 4 months, in addition to whatever time jury selection takes. And Fani Willis's office anticipates calling upwards of 150 witnesses. 150. Again, DA Willis's team says that 4-month-long 150 witness estimate is the same, whether the case is brought against all 19 defendants together or whether it's just Kenneth Chesbro and Sidney Powell. Still going to be 4 months, still going to be 150 witnesses. Now, the judge not only seemed sympathetic to that argument, but actually thought prosecutors were underestimating how long these trials would take. Judge McAfee thought a trial could easily take more like 8 months, which, though I have no law degree at all, makes sense to me. I mean, jury selection for this case feels very tricky. And 150 witnesses seems like a whole lot of witnesses. So splitting the cases, severing them from one another in the parlance of the court, and having one trial in October for just 2 defendants and then another further down the line for everyone else, that could be setting up the court for some very lengthy hearings, not to mention staggering inefficiency. But Judge McAfee appeared to be even more skeptical of the alternate option, having all 19 defendants go to trial together on October 23rd. In particular, he seemed worried about whether it was even logistically possible to get through all of the pretrial motions for 19 defendants, including, by the way, a former president, and get through all of those in just a month.
This is going to be a case with a lot of pretrial motions. And again, I don't know how many hearings we're going to need to have to sort through all those. But if we compress our timeline to 40-something days, our ability to even be able to really weigh those and think through these issues, again, it just seems a bit unrealistic to think that we can handle all 19 in 40-something days.
The judge has given DA Willis's office a deadline of next Tuesday to file a brief explaining how they think a trial for all 19 defendants starting on October 23rd could actually work. Joining me now are Christy Greenberg, former deputy chief of the criminal division at the Southern District of New York, and Mimi Rocha, former federal prosecutor and the current DA for Westchester County right here in New York State. Christy, Mimi, thank you for being here tonight. This is really where the fact that I have no law degree comes shining through in glaring light. But 19 defendants, October 23rd. Are we operating in the same universe as the DA's office? Is this even possible, Mimi?
Look, I think if the DA says it's possible, which she has very affirmatively, I think it is possible. Do I think it's going to happen? Do I think it's maybe the best idea, even for the case? No. The judge will decide that, but, yes, they have to prove the conspiracy no matter how many defendants are in the case. They have to prove the enterprise. They have to prove, in essence, the same case. But having 19 lawyers to do cross-examinations, to make objections, that is what will make that size of a case much
unwieldy.
Longer and unwieldy. And I think this judge seems very common sense. And, I think the DA is doing absolutely what she should be doing. The government is always ready. The people are ready. The state of Georgia is ready. And so she is ready. Would she do it if she had to? Absolutely. And I'm sure she'd do a very good job.
Okay, but and the estimate, our eminence grise, although I'm sure he would not like the Grease part of that. But Andrew Weissman tweeted today, Fani Willis saying she will call 150 witnesses is really absurd. Over-trying a case is never a good thing for the government and opens the door to the defense to score points and play games. 150 witnesses, no matter who's on trial, it does seem aggressive, does it not?
It seems unwise to say that you are going to present the exact same case no matter who the defendants are. If you only have 2 defendants who are a part of 2 very discrete schemes, you don't need to start proving up all of the other evidence with respect to 17 other defendants that the jurors are never going to meet. That's going to be confusing, and the jurors may start to resent the prosecutors for making this go on so long. She's estimating 4 months. The judge said, actually, that could take 8 months. Again, you have to prove a pattern of racketeering. You have to prove there's an enterprise, but you don't necessarily need to put on the exact same case to do that when you only have 2 defendants versus 19.
Why is she doing that then? Is that just because she wants these folks tried together? And if she does, what is a reasonable timeline for that, Mimi?
I think she's doing it, again, because I think that is the position that a prosecutor who charges 19 people together must take. You must say that you're prepared to try them together. And yes, because she believes that they acted in concert. They acted together. And so it would be more efficient in some ways, from her point of view, to do the case once. I sorry to interrupt you. I understand why she wants them to go together. I guess I'm confused as to why she says, regardless of whether they're tried together, they're all going to get 150 witnesses at their trial. Yeah, look, I think they're making arguments right now to the judge as to why he shouldn't break it up. And this is one of several arguments that were made. I've charged 40 defendant cases. They were organized crime cases. I've never had more than 4 at a time go to trial. either because most of them pled out, cooperated, or because the judge severed them. It's not common, but I do get the sense here that this judge is going to not have separate trials for everyone, but maybe break it up into some more manageable pieces. And then there will, or wait and see though, right? Who does plead out? Who does cooperate? I mean, it's very unlikely that all 19 will go to trial. They have a right to, and they might, but in experience, that's just unlikely to happen.
Well, right. I think the broad assumption here was that 19, a bunch of them are going to flip. They're going to plead out, whatever. When does that part start happening? Because TikTok, it's September 6th. I don't even know what day it is. October 23rd is not that far away from now. And that's the sort of expiration date we are theoretically working with. So what is happening behind the scenes with some of these defendants?
It starts now.
Okay.
There's a scheduling order now in the case with Powell and Chesbrough. And if you want to be a witness in that case and get cooperation points for the fact that you are going to testify at that trial, getting in now would make sense, and before any pretrial motions are filed. So you have to imagine at least some of these 19 defendants are having real conversations with their lawyers about whether or not they're going to cooperate.
There's another part of this that I think has gone largely under discussed, which is the removal piece. Mark Meadows and other defendants are saying, take this out of state court, send it to federal court, right? That decision has not yet been made. There is likely to be an appeals process that could take some time. This is what Judge McAfee, I think we have the sound from him today, bringing up that very important point to the prosecutors. Let us take a listen.
So if it's a 4-month trial that starts in October, we're potentially sitting at a point where we presented the entire state's case. Maybe even the jury has returned a verdict, but we can't enter that judgment of conviction until the 11th Circuit comes to a decision. Is that kind of the scenario we're playing out here?
Help me understand this, Mimi. So if for example, Mark Meadows is still trying to appeal, let's say they say, you can't throw it out, it stays in state court. And if he appeals that decision, it's working its way through the court system, potentially at the same time that the trial is still happening. And if a verdict is returned in the trial, you cannot actually convict until the removal process is complete, that whole appeals process is complete. Is that right?
That seems to be what the judge is saying. I'm not sure that's exactly right. I mean, it wouldn't be right if Meadows' case was severed, right? Because you could still sever his case.
Right.
And so, but he would have to do that ahead of time, and he seems not necessarily inclined to do that. I think at some point he said something about double jeopardy, and he's worried about a conviction, at the state level, and then there's going to be a federal possible trial. There's also still the question of whether if Meadows' motion is successful, does that mean everybody's? And the law is not clear, as many people have said, on whether. So that's going to have to be decided as well. So look, I don't know. I mean, I would be hesitant to predict how this is going to play out. I don't think anybody can.
Wait, it's terra incognito, legally speaking, in a certain way, isn't it?
Yes.
It is Thursday, the 7th of September of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, our little Yorkie, is the door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Now, just a little. Too much. Some people can't take too much. And some people don't want too little. But we have it just right. Just right. How are you? We like to joke around, as you know. But there's some serious to do out there in the world. And we'll laugh in the face of that, too, because that's what we do. Yeah. Okay, so Elon, how do you pronounce Musk's name? I like to call him Elon. So if that's not the going way, well, too bad. That's how I'm doing it. I only know what I read. Anyway, Elon is still on his tirade that the Jews are the cause of all of his misfortune. And wow, I guess so. Because apparently, they're in his grill and he don't like it. God, it just... And he's out there telling everybody right now, I'm the least anti-Semitic person in the world. Where have we heard that before? Boy, the guy's out there. Once again, I'm just going to keep saying this. Okay, he's pulling a Henry Ford. What is it about these, I don't know, industrialists who are so easily susceptible to, well, extreme right-wing ideologies? What is it about them? Anyway, Henry Ford was one of the great anti-Semites, too. He was out there passing off pamphlets called the International Jew. I'll just remind you once again, I've been doing it this week. And it's only Thursday. Well, it's almost the end of the week, isn't it? Anyway. The International Jew was a more expanded version of the Elders of Zion, the Turner Diaries. So you can imagine what that entails. So now Elon Musk is pulling a Henry Ford. And we're just supposed to stand by and take it? Okay. Now, because the Anti-Defamation League has been invoked, there's a lot of people who, I think that the argument about, the Palestinian issue in Israel is quite profound, and the ADL has taken a stance upon that, and what they're tasked to do is anything or anyone or any group that expresses anti-Semitism, they're going to stand up and confront. Now, I just have to say, tongue-in-cheek, I've never heard a Palestinian group ever utter anything anti-Semitic. Like kill the Jews. I've never heard that before. It's not to say, now I'm saying tongue-in-cheek, because it's true. And the ADL is tasked to confront that. I understand that completely. That doesn't mitigate or excuse any kind of racism or xenophobia or, what may be coming from the Israeli side about Palestinians. Get it? And I will remind folks that the ADL has stood up for Sikhs, Muslims who have been beaten with clubs by white supremacists. I'm just saying, okay? They're tasked to confront anything that is anti-Semitic from any group, anywhere. But, according to Elon Musk, they are some all-powerful, I don't know, they got octopus tentacles everywhere. The ADL is pulling the strings of Hollywood. They're pulling the strings of media. They're pulling the strings of woke corporations. The ADL is woke, according to Elon Musk. And then shortly after that, he said, woke is anti-human. Wow. I'm just saying that we've had pogroms all over the face of Europe back in the day for a lot less. Okay? And this guy thinks that he knows it all. Well, some of us might say he doesn't know anything. I might conjecture that he knows exactly what he's doing, and the results that he envisions is the results he wants. And what is that? Chaos. The chance to round up the Jews and all their fellow travelers, by the way. And there's a lot of us. I'll just give you a little sort of background. In our family, we would ask certain members of our family if maybe we came from Europe. Are we Jewish? Because you look at pictures of like our relatives and stuff, and you're like, wow, you know, they're like right in the midst of all that. And just the ferocious denial. We're not Jewish. It was shocking when I first heard it a couple of times as a kid. Because immediately it sounded like they were trying to hide something, like maybe we're Jewish. And this is before I really understood, you know, what it meant to be Jewish. To be the finger pointed at you, to have your businesses burned down. I knew a little bit about what happened during the Holocaust. I knew very little about what happened before that. But I learned quickly. Because that ferocious denial then sent me to the library. And yeah, we had those back in the day. I know people are going to forget what a library is. It's really sad. Sort of like the similar things that happened with the burning of the library at Alexandria and any other sacking of libraries anywhere in the history of the universe. Anyway, I went to the library and I started doing my research. And what I found was horrendous. And what I understood is that members of my family escaped Europe during times of pogroms from areas where pogroms were being pogromed. And then I found out that there were also a lot of Jewish groups or groups of people who escaped those pogroms, and they took up residence in Mexico and kind of hid. Yep. We're Catholics. And all the time they had their little secret Jewish meetings, planning to take over Elon Musk and all that is his. God, that guy's a crazy ass. I say it's time to nationalize Starlink. Okay? Fold SpaceX into NASA. Sell Tesla off as parts to the big three automakers. What we're going to do with those chargers? Well, I think what we should do is make a universal adapter so everybody can use them that has an electric car. And then after that guy stewed a little in home confinement, hey, how about a penthouse in Vegas? And he's let his hair grow out a little. You know, he actually has plugs. So I don't know how much his hair is going to grow out. Maybe some weird sort of like mullet with a big bald pate on the top. And exceedingly long fingernails. He's going to be doing a Howard Hughes. And that is when we take that hyperlink tunnel of his and turn it into a real amusement ride that people can enjoy. I think it's time. Because I don't understand how an anti-Semite, I don't care if he's pulling a Henry Ford, oh, we need him. No. Do everything that I just suggested, from nationalizing Starlink all the way down to making the hyperlink into a real amusement ride that people can enjoy. Now that is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Indeed. What do we have in store for you today? Oh my gosh, we're just like ranting on as we do most mornings now. In the beginning, we didn't really rant, but give me a pulpit, maybe I'll bully it. Anyway, what do we have in store? Well, at the top, it is a question that Alex and the others were kind of considering, like, about how long does it take to put an election theft conspiracy on trial? Funny Willis says 4 months. They're saying 8. I don't know, let's split difference, say, okay, about 6. I like 5. 4 even actually sounds better, but we'll go 5. On the rest of the menu, in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, a U.S. federal judge ordered that Texas must remove Abbott's illegal floating buzzsaw border barriers in the Rio Grande. Wisconsin's gerrymandering rides to the rescue of its gerrymandering. And the former Orange Escala state attorney filed a lawsuit against Ron DeSantis and asked the Florida Supreme Court to reverse his order removing her from office. And she's an elected official. He just said, no, we don't like you because, well, maybe because she's black. I think so. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the European Union will target Apple, Amazon, Meta, and other big tech companies in the next phase of its digital crackdown. And Japan launched a rocket carrying a lunar lander and an X-ray telescope to explore the origins of the universe. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and just down a skosh near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page, and becoming a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and sending us, if you're able, of course, what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month. That helps us pay our bills, or at least, put a big dent in it. And other costs associated with running this powerhouse of resistance against dark forces arrayed against representative democracy, not only here in America, but around the world. And we won't have it. And we thank you for that generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. We're not going to let them. And thank you. Thank you. And if you could continue doing so, and those of you who out there who might consider doing so in the future, we thank you as well, because we're not going anywhere, and we're going to pay our bills. That way we fly under the radar, and we get away with it. And thank you for letting us get away with it. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, etc., just go to @Netroots Radio wherever. And Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. You can also follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Instagram, Tumblr, yeah, at Justice Putnam. I'm at Justice Putnam, or simply Justice Putnam, most everywhere, not Radio Justice. Okay, that's just sort of like a pen name. Not even a pen name. Anyway, at Justice Putnam. And the reason for that is that I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes 10 minutes before showtime. And if you follow those social media feeds, you'll get the links right there, and you'll be able to read the full article in its entirety and know exactly who the reporter is, who penned the piece. And that's what we do. So do it. Follow me there. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. It will be probably something different on these other platforms, but we'll see, because I got to get down to it and start the show on those other platforms. But most importantly, if you would like to pick up podcasts, you can do so at Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. Really, wherever podcasts can be found. You just can't find them at Stitcher anymore because SiriusXM sucks almost as much as Spectrum. Yeah, or Disney, depending on what side of that fence you're on. But thank you, SiriusXM, because, Stitcher had been around for a while, and now they're not. Okay. Got it off my chest once again. It feels better. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, is out of the Washington Post by Nick Muroff. A federal judge yesterday, Wednesday, ordered Texas to reposition floating barriers the state placed in the middle of the Rio Grande, rebuking one of the more contentious elements of Abbott's effort to deter illegal border crossings. The preliminary injunction granted by Judge David A. Ezra sided with the U.S. Justice Department, which filed a lawsuit in July arguing Texas had no authority to install a 1,000-foot-long segment of the spiked orange buoys in the river. Not only spiked, but they got like little buzzsaws on them, too. And the river is an international waterway where the federal government has jurisdiction. Now, Ezra, a Reagan appointee, gave Texas until September 15th to relocate the floating barrier to the U.S. side of the riverbank in coordination with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Texas's conduct irreparably harms the public safety, navigation, and the operations of federal agency officials in and around the Rio Grande, Ezra wrote in the order, adding that Texas will be required to cover the cost of moving the barriers. Bump of the Washington Post brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Janet Protoswitch was sworn in as a justice on the Wisconsin Supreme Court at the beginning of August. At the beginning of September, Republican legislators began pushing to impeach her. The impetus is not anything Protosewicz has done in her brief tenure. She'd have been hard-pressed to have crossed too many lines, given that she has not even heard one case yet. Instead, one ostensible motivation for the move is alleged impropriety stemming from Protasewicz's likely disinclination to recuse herself from lawsuits she discussed on the campaign trail. Protasewicz's election this year gave liberals a one-vote majority on the bench, and that was allowing Democrats in the state a viable path toward undoing heavily gerrymandered legislative districts in the state. Two lawsuits challenging the maps were brought forward for the court's consideration. While seeking election to the court, Protasewicz criticized the district maps, the rationale for recusal cited by her critics. Allowing Protasewicz to vote on the maps would probably mean that the boundaries will be redrawn, weakening the disproportionate power Republicans have wielded in the state legislature for years. So they're using that disproportionate power in consideration of impeachment and removal. Now, the best way to summarize the imbalance at play in Wisconsin's legislative elections is to consider the results of assembly contests in 2016 and 2018. Every 2 years, all 99 assembly seats are put in front of voters. In 2016, Republicans won 64 of those seats, 65% of the total, while winning only 52% of the votes cast in assembly races across the state. Democrats got 35 seats. 2 years later, in the national Democratic wave election, Democratic Assembly candidates won 53% of the votes cast, a 6-point margin of victory. Perhaps you might assume then that they'd have landed somewhere around 64 seats, given how close that figure is to the Republican vote total in 2016. But the Democrats did not win 64 seats in the Assembly. They won only 36, one more than when the Republican Assembly candidates beat Democrats by 6 points statewide in 2016. In subsequent elections, the results have been remarkably consistent. Republicans have won at least 62% of available seats while never topping 54% of the statewide vote. That is why they want to impeach the new liberal justice. Sentinel brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Monique Worrell, the former Orange Osceola state attorney, has filed a lawsuit against Governor Ron DeSantis, asking the Florida Supreme Court to reverse his order removing her from office. Worrell is accusing DeSantis of citing vague allegations against her in his case for her suspension, which has rattled community organizers and people in the legal community who rallied on Tuesday, calling the governor's action unconstitutional at a series of press conferences in Orange County, Tampa, and Miami. DeSantis' suspension of Worrell follows a string of criticism from law enforcement leaders accusing her of not prosecuting crime aggressively enough. Filed on Wednesday yesterday, the lawsuit claims the executive order fails to identify any conduct by Worrell that would support suspension and counters data cited in the executive order as evidence of neglect of duty or incompetence while she was serving at the 9th Judicial Circuit. On August 9th, DeSantis replaced her with Orange County Judge Andrew Bain, who is a member of the Federalist Society. You know, Leonard Leo, that Federalist Society. Worrell is the second Democratic state attorney suspended by DeSantis. Last summer, the governor suspended Andrew Warren, a twice-elected state attorney for Hillsborough County, who pledged not to prosecute doctors who provide abortions. In the lawsuit, Worrell attempts to set her case apart from executive orders issued against Warren and her predecessor, Aramis Ayala, who in 2017 found herself in a feud with then-Governor Rick Scott over her opposition to seeking the death penalty in all cases. In Worrell's case, the lawsuit says, the governor has not alleged any practice or policy that would constitute a refusal to exercise prosecutorial discretion. The order vaguely refers to Ms. Worrell's practices and policies throughout, but notably fails to identify a single specific policy or practice, making the order distinguishable from recent cases involving other Florida state attorneys where the executive orders identify specific policies alleged to constitute a neglect of duty, the lawsuit reads. Well, that brings us to our break, and since the street sweeper is sweeping, why don't we? And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again. From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, this is Your Health Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series.
We highlight the latest vital health news, discoveries that affect your body and your mind.
And we break down the medical research to help you stay healthy. I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
We're Scientific American's senior health editors.
On today's show, we're talking about ticks and the nasty diseases these little blood-sucking vampires carry with them. One of them even makes you allergic to red meat and dairy.
I am terrified of ticks. I like to go hiking in the Hudson Valley, but I always try to wear long pants or use insect repellent, and I check for ticks when I get home.
You're really actually sort of like shaking terrified of ticks? Why?
Well, I especially worry about deer ticks because they carry Lyme disease, and those ticks are super common here in the Northeast. What about you, Josh?
Funny, I actually went to college not that far from Lyme, Connecticut, where that disease got its name, and I wasn't that worried about it then, but now I've got this dog with this dense black fur.
Oh, you mean Kayla?
Yep, good old Kayla, and it is very hard to see ticks in her fur because they're the same color. I once was brushing Kayla, and I brushed one onto myself, and I didn't see it for hours. Fortunately, it didn't bite me. It was just kind of hanging out, dangling from my leg.
I'm glad it didn't bite you, because ticks are more than just a nuisance. They transmit serious and sometimes deadly diseases. Lyme disease, for example, is probably the one we're most familiar with, and it's the most common vector-borne disease in the U.S.
Vector-borne means what exactly?
Any disease that's spread by insects that bite or suck on our blood, like ticks, mosquitoes, or fleas. Lyme disease is primarily caused by a bacterium called Borrelia burgdorferi, which is transmitted by the bite of the black-legged tick, more commonly known as the deer tick. This often results in that characteristic bullseye rash, as well as flu-like symptoms like fever, headache, fatigue, and sometimes joint pain.
Some people experience long-term chronic symptoms too, and those can include extreme fatigue or neurological issues.
Yeah, that's pretty awful. We actually know quite a lot about Lyme disease, or at least more than other kinds of diseases spread by ticks. But today I want to talk about a different tick-borne condition, which causes a particularly bizarre problem, an allergy to red meat. It's called alpha-gal syndrome. The tick bite causes an immune response to a sugar called galactose alpha-1,3 galactose.
Okay, Tanya, you get the hard science word of the week.
I thought you'd like that. The sugar, called alpha-gal for short, is present in most mammals except for humans and a few ape and monkey species.
Alpha-gal syndrome is a tick bite-associated allergic condition. We think people, after getting a tick bite in the few weeks or maybe a couple of months after, they start having allergic reactions when they consume red meat or other products that contain the alpha-gal sugar.
That's Gilbert Kirsch, chief of the rickettsial zoonoses branch at the CDC's Division of Vector-Borne Diseases. How's that for a title? I talked to him a couple weeks ago for a story about alpha-gal syndrome. He co-authored a couple of recent CDC reports about how widespread this condition is and what doctors know about it.
I'd never heard about this. A tick bite can make you allergic to hamburgers?
Yeah, strange as it may seem. Something that makes people eat less red meat might not sound so bad for the planet, but it's actually quite severe.
What kind of symptoms do people get?
They can be really debilitating. The reactions include gastrointestinal symptoms like diarrhea and vomiting.
And it's not just beef, right?
Right. Many mammalian products contain alpha-gal, like pork.
Bacon, sausages?
Yep.
Venison?
Yep.
Cheddar cheese, regular milk?
Yep, dairy too. It's even in gelatin.
So people with the syndrome could react to Jell-O. And also, and maybe more importantly, pills like gel caps, which are made from gelatin.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. It's not like you can just stop eating red meat and you'll be fine. It's actually really hard to avoid all products that contain alpha-gal. The allergy can cause symptoms outside the digestive system too.
There are other patients who have more traditional allergic reactions where they'll have hives And some develop anaphylaxis where they may have trouble breathing, swelling of the tongue, those kinds of symptoms, which can be quite serious and often result in visits to the emergency department.
So what kind of tick should we look out for, and where are they?
It's spread by the bite of the Lone Star tick, which is found in the U.S. South, Midwest, and Mid-Atlantic. The county with the most positive tests for alpha-gal syndrome is actually Suffolk County on Long Island.
So that's close to you New York City people.
It is, but it's not clear if there are really more cases here or if there's just more awareness of the condition.
Is there any guesstimate as to how many people actually have this allergy?
Well, according to a recent study by Kirsch and his colleagues, there were more than 110,000 people in the U.S. who tested positive for alpha-gal antibodies from 2010 to 2022. But he thinks the actual number of cases is likely much higher.
Lack of awareness among healthcare providers, we suspect that 110,000 is quite a bit undercounting, and we would estimate as many as 450,000 people may be living with alpha-gal syndrome in the United States. The number of positive tests has been going up year by year.
He mentioned lack of awareness. Do doctors really not know about this?
Some definitely don't. For a separate study, Kirsch and his colleagues surveyed healthcare providers about their knowledge of alpha-gal syndrome and how to treat it.
We did a survey of healthcare providers, and 42% of healthcare providers had not heard of alpha-gal. An additional 35% were not too confident in their ability to diagnose or manage a patient who had it.
So I'm not the only one just learning about this. It's kind of new and mysterious to the people who I'd go to for a diagnosis.
Yeah, it is. And there's no treatment. All you can do is avoid foods or medicines that contain alpha-gal. But some people experience fewer symptoms as time goes on.
The best thing, I guess, is to avoid getting bitten by a tick in the first place.
Well, yes, that's always the best strategy. So make sure to wear that DEET, and make sure to remove any ticks if you do find them.
And if you do get bitten by a tick, the first thing to do is remove the entire tick carefully using tweezers. And if you've had a possible tick bite and experience a rash or unusual symptoms, you should go see your doctor.
Definitely. But given how widespread alpha-gal syndrome already is, getting doctors to recognize it is the next step.
One of our objectives is to increase awareness about alpha-gal syndrome, both among the public and among healthcare providers, so that this can be recognized and managed appropriately.
It is just another reminder that if we ignore tick-borne diseases, our ignorance may come back to bite us. Your Health Quickly is produced by Talika Bose, Jeff Delvicio, Kelso Harper, Corinne Leung, and by us. It's edited by Ella Fetter and Alexa Lim. Our music is composed by Dominic Smith.
Our show is part of Scientific American's podcast, Science Quickly. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you like the show, give us a rating or a review. If you have ideas for topics we should cover, send us an email at yourhealthquickly@sciam.com. That's yourhealthquickly@sciam.com. I'm Tanya Lewis.
And I'm Josh Fishman.
We'll be back soon. Thanks for listening.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 1916. That was the day that the Federal Employees Compensation Act was signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson. The act was sponsored by Senator John Kern, a Democrat from Indiana, and Daniel McGillicuddy, a Democratic congressman from Maine. The act provided compensation for federal civil service employees that lost wages because they were hurt or killed on the job. There was great debate at the time over whether employees injured at work deserved to be compensated. Before the turn of the 20th century, those who sustained workplace injuries had little recourse. Employers blamed workers for accidents and typically refused compensation, leaving families destitute. Edward Gaynor, the president of the National Association of Letter Carriers, explained the debate around the 1916 proposal, saying, quote, "The only question, the fundamental question involved in this discussion is whether or not society should bear the burden of the injured worker in any industry." Increasingly, some lawmakers were beginning to make the case that society should indeed bear that burden. Workers and labor leaders organized around issues of workplace safety and demanded a compensation if they were injured on the job. The law providing such a safety net for federal employees was passed through the House of Representatives by an overwhelming margin of 288 to 6. Although the act only applied to federal employees, it was an important step forward in recognizing that all workers deserve to be compensated for workplace injuries. The Federal Office of Workers' Compensation Programs that operates today traces its history directly back to the 1916 Act. And because of this 1916 Act, 3 million federal employees and their families are covered under the Act's protection.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 53 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the low to mid 80s, and we'll have plentiful sunshine throughout the day, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, clear skies overnight with lows in the low to mid 50s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and then generally sunny tomorrow despite a few afternoon clouds, highs in the mid 80s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Ragweed pollen is rated moderate here in the little town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 29 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is in the high range at level 6. So still take care. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.02 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 88%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 88 degrees and fair. Paris is 91 degrees and sunny with a heat advisory. Rome is 91 and fair with its own heat advisory. Kabul is 71 and clear. Kyiv is 71 and sunny. Hong Kong is 78 degrees with rain. Tokyo is 78 and mostly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 50 degrees and fair. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees and mostly cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 66 and cloudy. And New York, New York is 90 degrees Fahrenheit, fair, with a heat advisory. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Kelvin Chan of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. 6 big tech companies, including Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft, faced fresh pressure yesterday, Wednesday, from the European Union, which moved to counter their digital dominance with far-reaching rules aimed at giving users more choices and making competition fairer. Google parent Alphabet, Facebook owner Meta, and TikTok parent ByteDance also were classified as online gatekeepers subject to the strictest requirements of the 27-nation EU's Digital Markets Act. The list of do's and don'ts seeks to prevent tech giants from cornering digital markets with the threat of whopping fines or even forcing companies to sell parts of their business to operate in Europe. That means European users of big tech social media or chat services could soon be able to send messages to rival platforms, avoid having their data used to show personalized ads, and choose which search engine or browser they prefer rather than being stuck with a default version. It is part of a sweeping update to EU's digital rulebook taking force this year and coming weeks after a companion package of rules aimed at keeping internet users safe. The Digital Services Act started kicking in. The most impactful online companies will all have to play by our EU rules, European Commissioner Thierry Breton, who's in charge of the bloc's digital policy, said on X, previously known as Twitter. DMA means more choices for consumers, fewer obstacles for smaller competitors, opening the gates to the internet. The European Commission, the EU's executive body, said digital platforms can be listed as gatekeepers if they act as key gateways between businesses and consumers by providing core platform services.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Yuri Kajiyama of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Japan launched a rocket today carrying an X-ray telescope that will explore the origins of the universe, as well as a small lunar lander. The launch of Hill-A rocket from Takashima Space Center in southwestern Japan was shown on live video by the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, known as JAXA. We have liftoff, the narrator at JAXA said as the rocket flew up in a burst of smoke, then flew over the Pacific. 13 minutes later after the launch, the rocket put into orbit around Earth a satellite called the X-ray Imaging and Spectroscopy Mission, or XRISM, which will measure the speed and makeup of what lies between galaxies. That information helps in studying how celestial objects were formed and hopefully can lead to solving the mystery of how the universe was created. In cooperation with NASA, JAXA will look at the strength of light at different wavelengths, the temperature of things in space, and their shapes and brightness. Also aboard the latest Japanese rocket is the Smart Lander for Investigating Moon, or SLIM, a lightweight lunar lander. The Smart Lander won't make lunar orbit for 3 or 4 months after the launch and would likely attempt a landing early next year, according to the space agency. The lander successfully separated from the rocket about 45 minutes after the launch and proceeded on its proper track to eventually land on the moon. JAXA workers applauded and bowed with each other from their observation facility. Well, congratulations. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.